It's Chris from Punk and Paisley back with another video. I hope you enjoyed the AI generated card there with my faux hawk. Gave me two heads initially. It turned, I have Nate Wiley and the crowd pleasers up here in the background. It turned them into white men. AI is racist. You knew it. You knew it. You didn't have to guess. And it made a hilarious, fed it the cover of Punk and Disorderly, and somehow it came out with this abomination that you can see in the card. It looks somewhat like Thomas Dolby in a horror movie, in some B movie. I have never actually had enough hair in my lifetime to get a decent mohawk. An irony is you need sort of hippie length hair to get the height, and I've just never been able to do that. I've always been very short haired, and now male pattern baldness has given me this sort of reverse mohawk. Accountant is never, it's the opposite of punk rock and the opposite of cool. And we are going to talk about punk rock today. We're going to talk about three of the most important compilations that came out during the 80s themselves. This helped shape tastes, time when the music was still fresh, or at least relatively fresh. Made a lot of this music that was out on 7-inch EPs or singles available on an LP form, and made a lot of it available on the United States side of the Atlantic. So we're going to talk about the Punk and Disorderly compilations and the little MacGuffin here, the little, what Hitchcock would call a MacGuffin, something to pull the story forward. I'm going to do my patented rating system of 1 to 10 for each track. For the initial album, Punk and Disorderly, its follow-up, Punk and Disorderly 2, Further Charges, and Punk and Disorderly 3, The Final Solution. These are all records I had these two records I bought in the 80s. Punk and Disorderly 3, I think I didn't come across until the 90s. I'm giving them a fresh listen, fresh ears for each track, and then I do the final X Factor. I'm going to look at the album package as a whole, weight that evenly as if it were a track. So that would be the 17th track in this case with 16 songs. We'll average it out, see where that falls. This video, we'll just look at the first volume, Punk and Disorderly, and then the volumes 2 and 3 we'll look at later. A lot of this was through Cherry Red, through the label and distribution. The first record is on the Posh Boy label. At least in the United States, it came out on the Posh Boy label out of Los Angeles. And the next two came out on Anagram, which is described as a division of Cherry Red. How big did Cherry Red get that they had a division? We'll go track by track. Classic album. Came out in 1981. This may have come out in 1982 in the States. I would have bought this about 1986. This is definitely one of the first... I'm going to say, could be one of the first 10 records I ever bought. Rock records I ever bought with, my own teenage money. Helped define and refine my tastes in music. Set me on the wrong path. I was set on the wrong path before that. Mad Magazine, National Lampoon, and that sort of thing already had me set on the good course in life before it made me punk rock ready. A lot of you graduated through the same... I've had this conversation with some of my friends, including at least one who's going to be seeing this video. We graduated through the steps of learning how to be a person properly. Some of that was Mad Magazine and the National Lampoon, and then your punk rock putting a good head on your shoulders, if not a good head of hair. So we'll kick things right off with my 1 to 10s. First track on here is Vice Squad. Vice Squad, always nice. Becky Bondage, female vocals, could actually sing. They could actually play their instruments, more or less. And the track on here is Last Rockers, which is a melodramatic, multi-tempo song about nuclear war and how all anybody really wanted to do was listen to their punk rock records. But those damn politicians dropped the bomb. And now we're wandering through the streets of post-apocalyptic London, and all for what? That is a great song. That is one of the great we could call it UK 82 songs, that second wave. These are all the second wave of bands that came along, that formed mostly in the late 70s, perhaps as late as 1980, and started getting one or two singles or 45s out in the early 80s, and then get compiled. And we're really, this was the direction that punk rock was going in Britain for those people who were not defining themselves as post-punk. These would have been hardcore kids in the United States, but that's not the term that was being used here. When you were just talking about punk rock and people that stay true to punk, or oi in some cases on here, they are the inheritors of the first wave of British punk rock, and they're playing things straight ahead. And you're starting to get some things. I'll note some of these tracks that are starting to get thrashy and whatnot, but that's neither here nor there. For the first track, Vice Squad, Last Rockers, giving it a 10. Giving it a 10, and that means that the album is averaging 10. So far, this is the best album ever released by humans, says Math and Science. Moving along to the second track, The Addicts, an all-time classic UK 82, you know, we're going to dress like the Clockwork Orange, Alex the Large and the Droogs. They have a wonderful track on here called Straight Jacket, which is nice and catchy. It's the punk rock you want to hear. I'm giving it a 9. We are at a 9.5 after 2 tracks. This is beginning to look like a fantastic album. Track number 3, mixing things up a little bit, at least as far as a record like this is going to go. Track number 3 is UKDK, and they have a wonderful anti-war song called For My Country, Pro Patria Mori. Poetic reference. I'm educated. I know these things. And track number 3, UKDK, went in a very goth direction. Never again, I've tracked down some of their other songs, and I've never again heard one that's such a good blend of somewhat off-kilter pop, bit of a gothiness, and the punk rock. To me, this is their best track. It's one of the top tracks on the album. It's a nice change of pace, even though it's only 3 tracks in. And For My Country, I give it a 10. I give it a 10. We are at a 9.67 because we do significant digits on this channel. And that is a pretty damn high score. Things are looking pretty good. Track number 4 is the band Disorder. Now, Disorder, despite the fact that they've got the DIS, they're a band starting with Dis. But they were early on that front. They were probably around before Discharge. So it's not one of the Discharge Dis clones band, if you know what I'm talking about. From the 80s, I guess, through the present day, there's a lot of bands that you know exactly what they sound like. You know they're going to try and do their best imitation of the band Discharge because the band name is one word beginning with the syllable dis. And in fact, sometimes the next syllable after dis doesn't make any sense. It's no longer an English word, but you know when you see the black and white on the cover, and you know when you see the disc, you know what that band sounds like. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that there are these bands that are telegraphing to you, the punk rock consumer, exactly how they sound. But Disorder is earlier than that. They just picked up a thesaurus and they said, what's a synonym for anarchy? Any sense of the word anarchy, and they came up with Disorder, and they recorded a song called Complete Disorder, which unfortunately kind of lives up to the name. I think it's a bit of a mess. There's a little section during the beginning when it seemed like the entire band wasn't really sure what was going to happen in the next bar. Just not a great song. Charitably, I gave it a 3. And that brings us down to an 8 for the average for the album, which is still a pretty damn great album. Track number 5, Peter and the Test Tube Babies. We've got Band from the Pub, which I was misremembering as Band from the Pubs, plural. It is Pubs, singular. It's a nice little sort of sing-along. It starts with noises, background noises of the British public house, and is evocative of that, and then you get this, you get this little sing-along with the funny but true statement that they don't want punks, they just want drunks. I think that my memory of the song was better than the song itself is. It's got a little bit of a sing-along thing going on. The pub noises add something to it, but I ended up giving it a 6. And that brings our average down to 7.6, which is still a pretty strong album. Track number 6, The Disruptors with Young Offender. Young Offender, is this actually a one-chord song? It can't be more than 2. My tuneless na-na-nine just then might actually be more tuneful and varied than the actual song. Young Offender, it's a bit of a sing-songy, sing-along affair. Could not possibly be a more simple track. Inoffensive, I gave it a 5. I gave it a 5, maybe just for old time's sake. You know, when I didn't know a lot of music, it's one of the songs that I knew, and that brings us down to a 7.16 for the album. Still, you know, head above water, above average album. Track number 7, Red Alert. Oh, now here's a classic UK 82 band, Red Alert, with what might be their best song. In fact, in a few cases, in more than a few cases, I think that this album contains what to this point of their recording histories were these bands' respective best songs. And in Red Alert's case, I have not heard anything from them that is better than the track In Britain. It's got the Football Terraces sing-along chorus. It's got clapping. It's got some tunefulness. It's fast. It gets in, gets your blood pumping. Good musicianship for what's going on here, and I give it a 9. This is what the punk rock that you came to this album for is all about. I gave it a 9. Brings us up to a 7.43. And track number 8 is Blitz. Blitz, one of the classic oi bands. In fact, the refrain in this song is literally oi, oi, oi. And the track is Someone's Gonna Die. It's their best known song, I believe. And there's a reason for that. Very roughly recorded. They've got some cool things going on. There's such distortion on the guitar that the distortion pushes through to being used in a couple of the breaks in the song, almost the way that Pete Townsend was using the synthesizer on Who's Next. You know, it's definitely an interesting approach to the songwriting and production. It is an oi song. It's one of the best ones. I give it a 9. And that brings us up to a 7.63 for the A side of the album. That's pretty damn good. Hard to beat. Side 2, track number 9 in effect. First track of side 2 is the lone American band, Dead Kennedys, out of San Francisco. I don't think you need much introduction to Dead Kennedys. This is an early track of theirs, released as a single. A lot of these songs were actually released as singles, and a lot of them charted in the UK indie charts, believe it or not. Something that would probably very likely not happen now. Dead Kennedys, Kill the Poor, absolutely classic track of theirs. Maximum Sarcasm, classic early Dead Kennedys with their first drummer Ted. And I give it a 9. Which brings us up to 7.78. Dead Kennedys are no doubt on here because their music was being distributed by Cherry Red in the UK, who had a lot to do. A lot of their stuff was licensed for the album. Track number 10, The Partisans, who were out of Wales. These are not all London bands. They're from all over Britain. And the Partisans were out of Wales, and they have an absolutely brutal track on track 10. This is not so much a song as an obituary. It's Police Story is the name of the track, and it's about the brutal police killing of apparently a laborer from Liverpool named James Kelly. And it's kind of a brutal track. It's a pretty good punk rock song. It's a wonderful protest track. The Partisans, Police Story, I give the song a 7. That brings us down to a 7.7 for the album, still pretty strong. Number 11 is D-Mob. probably short for demobilization, which it's not really a word that Americans would use so much. But they have this track, No Room for You, that was on their first EP that may have come out, I think it came out in 1980 or even 79, may have been recorded or written in 79. So a little bit long in the tooth as these things go. Something to think about is that when an album like this comes out in 1982, it's before the World Wide Web. This will be a theme that I come back to again and again. You have to listen to these things and look at them somewhat with the eyes and ears of a person who does not have access to the internet, where things are being done at the speed of mail, where a long-distance phone call, let alone an international phone call, costs an enormous amount of money, comparatively for the time, and things move a little slowly. And, a record, if there's not a deal for Posh Boy to be releasing this in Los Angeles, it probably took a little while for that to happen. So there's often a gap of a year or 2 or 3 years between the time something's recorded and the time it makes it across the Atlantic in one direction or the other. I mean, Kill the Poor. If this is on an album in 1982 in the UK, when was Kill the Poor recorded? 1980? Earlier? 79? Yeah, they have the Dead Kennedys by that point have a different drummer and a pretty markedly different sound. So sometimes try to listen to these things and try to place these things in a historical rock and roll context in your mind through that lens. Yeah, so number 11, D-Mob, No Room for You is an absolutely classic track. It's just so great to me. I've heard the other 2 songs on that EP that they had, and they can't hold a candle. I mean, few things in this era of punk rock could hold a candle, I think, to No Room for You, because it's got the punk energy. It's lamenting the loss of clubs that you'd like to go to see your favorite bands, and nobody cares about you, the punk rock fan. And it's got this wonderful straight out of the 1950s guitar. This is when people talk about punk rock getting back to rock and roll roots and the excitement of that, it's hard to come up with a track that captures that better. No Room for You is a 10. That brings us to a 7.91 by my calculation. Track 12 is the insane Last Day. Now this is one of a couple of songs on the album, one of a few songs, at least 3 songs on the album about nuclear war. This is a fast one. It's a rough one. I gave it a 7. And that brings us to a 7.83 for the album. Still a very strong score. 13th slot is an Abrasive Wheels track. Army song. Few bands sound more like their band name than Abrasive Wheels, because that is an abrasive guitar sound. It's an abrasive thrashy guitar sound while still having a sing-songiness to the songwriting and the vocals. This is Army song. It's obviously about being in the Army and how enjoyable that is. Go sign up. Contact your recruiter right away, kids. And Abrasive Wheels, Army song, kind of sing-alongy. I give it a 7, solid 7. Brings us to a 7.77 for the album. It's all 7s. All 7s all the way. Track 14, in effect, is Chaos UK. Chaos UK, I have to be honest, I've never been as wild. We're going to run across a few bands in these albums who a lot of their output to me seemed a bit generic. Not terribly exciting, not terribly dynamic songwriting in a lot of cases. I mean, the worst case of that here to me is the Disorder track. I know now their grandchildren, the grandchildren of the band, are going to leave me withering messages on YouTube now. But yeah, the Chaos UK track, to me, this is one of their better tracks. 4-minute warning, which is absolutely about the time window that people in Britain would have in the way of warning from Eastern European missiles headed their way. Not a whole lot of time to do much. You could play the song twice. That's what you could do. You could play the song twice while the missiles are on their way. And that would be about all you'd have the time to do. It starts with a growl. It starts with a guitar growl. It's barely hits. It's appropriate for the grim subject matter. We're approaching thrash and 4-minute warning. Yeah, to me, this is maybe the best track of theirs I've heard. I will give it a 7. Damning with faint praise there, and that is a 7.71. Still pretty strong album. Then we get to track 15, The Outcasts have a wonderful song called Mania. You would think that all of the ways to do sing-songy group chorus chanting vocals would have been tapped out by 1981 or 1982. And that's not the case here. That's not the case. The Outcasts came up with a fresh sounding track, more of a pounding, more toward rock than hardcore rhythm, and a catchy tune. You could rearrange this, and it could be a catchy pop song on its own with different instrumentation that might chart, for God's sakes. So yeah, Outcast Mania, really strong track. I give it a 9. Brings us up to a 7.8, which is a pretty damn strong album. And then in the final position, 16th track is GBH, aka Charged GBH, Grievous Bodily Harm. Americans don't have that, by the way. If you happen to be watching this and you're British or Australian or something, we have Assault and Battery. That could be together. Assault includes threatening the violence, but then assault and battery would be going forward and committing the violence. And then, we have, I guess, you could have attempted murder. You could have manslaughter if you kill somebody, but they're not going to hit you with murder charges because there are different requirements for how you're going to prosecute that. But we don't have GBH. That's not something you can be charged with. As I'm saying I live in Italy now, but I am American, I just thought I'd throw that out there. So that's one of those British references that, you would hear in the punk rock stuff, and I would have to go look it up. probably in my high school library or something, because there wasn't a World Wide Web yet. GBH, is that a drug? Sounds like a drug. Is that roofie drug? But yeah, Race Against Time. Race Against Time, I think, is one of their finest earlier tracks. I was fortunate enough to see GBH open for NDC in Philadelphia about 2 years ago. That was a really good time. It was my first time seeing either band, even though they're not 100% of the original members of either band, but a really good night out. You could accuse GBH of being generic if it were not for the fact that they're one of the bands, if not the primary band, that created the variety of music that they play. I mean, this isn't the Pistols or the Clash. This is faster, this is more aggressive, it's not metal, it's its own thing, it's a punk rock context, and they can't do it generically. You do it generically if you're the copy. But honestly, this track here, Race Against Time, this is if you saw this cover art and you wanted to buy this album, this is what you were hoping the album sounded like. This is the fulfillment of the promise of the cover art. So, I mean, I gave it a 10. And that brings us up to a 7.94 for the 16 tracks on the album. Sick Boy would be the other top track of GBH. And then I think I really like their stuff. I remember really liking the album that came out a bit later in the 80s. They had City Baby, Attacked by Rats, but then there was City Baby's Revenge. I had City Baby's Revenge on cassette because it was that time of the 80s, and sometimes you went to the store and the albums you liked were, that basically were available on vinyl or cassette, and sometimes the cassette was there. The cassette was the interesting thing that was there, and I had that, and I played that to ribbons. That to me was a lot of great, good stuff. But Race Against Time, one of their top tracks. Now, we can talk about the package itself. The album, there's no information about any of these bands, which is really kind of a shame. It's very much a mercenary thing. This is a for-profit thing. These were bands that did have singles in the indie charts in the UK, and it's a cash grab. This is not one label that's pushing the bands to you to introduce the bands to you so that you go out and buy their album. It's not a loss leader, like a classic Warner Brothers loss leader where we're going to tell you about the bands. It's not Bump putting out a compilation of songs that are all on the Bump label, hoping to tell you a bit about the band and give you a sample so you go out and buy other bump records. This is very mercenary, and unfortunately, the DIY thing was not fully or well developed outside of the anarcho-punk thing, really, and you were starting to get that with American hardcore. But these bands that formed in the late 70s were still signed to labels that were just, in some cases, they were smaller labels, but they behaved very much like the majors. You know, they didn't have a big commitment to the fans. So there's no information about any of the bands on here. I very much enjoy the graphics. There is a continuing theme on all of these of the postcard punks, as Dick Lucas would call them in Culture Shock. I mean, you gotta kind of, I grade this somewhat on a curve because you have to expect the fact that it's mercenary. So I gave it a 7 for the package. That's for thematic unity, sound quality, track selection, the overall look and feel of the thing. And the 7 brings us to a 7.88, which is just, that's a high. Try doing this with any of your albums at home, track by track. Rate them 1 through 10 and then rate the album. You do the average and you tell me how often you're getting above a 7.88, which is almost, you know, it's almost an 8. That's a pretty damn strong album. Now, in my next 2 videos, I'm going to tackle Punk and Disorderly 2, Further Charges, and Punk and Disorderly 3, The Final Solution. We're going to weigh them against each other. 3 enter the ring. Only 1 may exit. Champagne. And, yeah, that's about that. So I would be very interested in hearing your reactions. Tell me I'm right. Tell me I'm wrong. Leave me a comment. And look forward to the next couple of videos. This is, again, Chris. I hope you've enjoyed the video. You are watching Punk and Paisley. And remember, kids, until next time, keep on rocking in the unfree world.